Tonight we'll study lesson number 22 on this subject of practical Christian living. And I apologize about my voice. I've had a lot of people ask me if I was not feeling well, and that is not the case. I've just used my voice screaming at my wife an awful lot lately, and so my voice is just strained. Tonight, lesson number 22. Take your Bible and turn to Matthew chapter number 5. Matthew chapter number 5. When you arrive there, go to verse number 1. Matthew chapter 5, verse number 1. I'm going to read all the way through verse number 9. Matthew chapter 5, and I'll read through verse 9 and maybe all the way through verse 12. We'll see. The Bible says this, Matthew 5, verse 1, and seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was sat, his disciples came unto him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice, be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Look back at verse number 9, where it says, Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. God is saying here, if you're a peacemaker, you're behaving like one of God's kids, and it'll be noticed. Now, the lesson for tonight is how to be a peacemaker. How to be a peacemaker. This lesson comes from what we call the Beatitudes. Someone rightfully deemed the Beatitudes as attitudes that ought to be. These are attitudes that we as Christians should develop, and these are ways that we should behave. Now that word blessed, notice, is used over and over and over again. I mean, it just says blessed, 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 blessed. Now the definition for that word blessed, it means that there's contentment produced as a result of some behavior. It says blessed is someone that behaves in this certain way. In other words, there's a certain contentment in the life of a person that behaves these ways. It's something that is to be envied, if you will, and not sinful envy. It's a quality that people say, I'd like to have that contentment. Really, the word blessed encompasses all the positive delights of the Christian life. Things like contentment, and then you add joy, and then peace, and then satisfaction and fulfillment. All of those things have something to do or help to define that word blessed. We see here it says, Blessed are the poor in spirit. It says, Blessed are they that mourn, and blessed are the meek, and blessed are they which hunger and thirst after righteousness. Blessed are the merciful and the pure in heart. Blessed are those that are persecuted for doing right. And then finally, verse number 9, we come down where it says, Blessed are the peacemakers. You see, God tells us there is contentment or joy or satisfaction found in being a peacemaker. There's coming a day when Jesus comes again and the rapture comes, and they snatch the Christians off of this world. You say, boy, that is going to be a time of chaos. Oh, it'll be a time of chaos because of the surprise of the snatching away of the Christians. But I'll tell you what's really going to cause the chaos. You take all the peacemakers off the earth, and you've got a mess on your hand. And God tells us that Christians, it says, blessed are the peacemakers. Let me ask you a question. Is your life, is it a life where you try to be peaceful? Or do you try to be peaceful among people? Do you want war or peace? Happy or blessed are those people who try to band relationships together, that try to salvage relationships and help people to get along. Folks, you and I, we're to be peacemakers. That's what the Bible says. Now, let me explain though. Peacemakers, these are people that are forgivers. Now, if the peace is the peace that we're trying to develop is between you and someone, then someone's going to have to be a forgiver. No church is full of peacemakers unless it's full of forgivers. Peacemakers are led by principle and not emotion. You'll have to understand that. People that tend not to have the kind of peace in relationships that they're supposed to have, they're not living their life by principle, they're living their life by their emotions. They're making their decisions, and their relationships are determined on how they feel. Our relationships are to be determined by how God told us to behave. That's what makes good relationships. See, if you let your emotions run wild, you're not going to have peace in your life, and you're definitely not going to have peaceful relationships. Peacemakers are people that tend to be slow to wrath. See, let's face it, if you're quick-tempered, there's not peace around you. Peacemakers are those who by principle control their temper. I would be in wars all the time, except for I've learned how to bite my tongue. I hesitate. I think before I take a swing. Now, I had to develop that. I have to work at that. I don't practice it perfectly, but if you want to be a peacemaker, you better get you under control, because your mouth and your flesh naturally wants to launch out, and you cause a fuss and you cause a fight. See, peacemakers are forgivers. Peacemakers are led by principle, not by emotion. Peacemakers are slow to wrath. Peacemakers are thinkers. Peacemakers are thinkers. I call upon the leadership of this church. Be a thinker. Be a thinker. We need to have peaceful relationships among God's people. And let me tell you something. You can go to the world and fuss and fight with everybody all the time. Why in the world would anybody from the world want to come join a church that behaves just like the world? They ought to come to the church because there is peaceful relationships among the people. Now, will we practice that perfectly? No, but we ought to be striving to be peacemakers. Peacemakers are planners. They're planners. You say, what do you mean by a planner? I go into many situations. I go into many relationships. I go into counseling sessions. I go into circumstances planning on being a peacemaker. I don't go in with my guns drawn, shooting and blowing everything away. I go in with my guns holstered with a plan to try to figure out how to do what's right, but then to keep peace while I do it. You see, peacemakers are planners. If a husband and wife, if one tends toward tension, the other one probably tends toward planning that there be no tension. But you have to be a planner. If you're quick-tempered, quickly opinionated, got to blow your mouth off quickly, you won't make as good a peacemaker as what you could. Because a peacemaker is someone that is thinking and planning, and they're being careful on how they handle themselves. Peacemakers care about people more than they do circumstances. Hear that? Peacemakers care more about people than circumstances. Do you realize how many stupid little things people fuss about? The dumbest little things. We would both cry and laugh if I had every married couple come up here tonight and tell me what you fought about in the last week. You fought about toast. You have fought about washcloths. You have fought about a dollar bill. You have fought about the dumbest little things. Peacemakers care more about people than things and circumstances. Now, let me clarify something. Now, my whole purpose, I don't want to dilute the whole teaching on peacemaking, but I do want to qualify it. I do not believe in peace or unity at any cost. I do not believe that. Jude verse number 3 says that we should earnestly contend for the faith. So let me explain that the faith has to do with the purity of the Word of God and the Holy Spirit and the New Testament church and the techniques of soul winning, etc. Now, if you ever think that I'm going to roll over and play dead and not stand up and fight for those things, you're crazy. Because that is the faith. And God said, earnestly contend for the faith. See, there are some people they say, peace, peace, unity, unity. Let's all drop our King James Bibles and let's all give up the teaching of the Holy Spirit and let's give up on soul winning so we can all get along. Phooey on that junk. Now, we've got to understand there are some things for which we are to fight. But the problem is most of the time we're fighting over things we shouldn't fight over. We want to fight over our opinions and fight over piddly little things. I knew two guys in one city that went to task with each other about when their midweek service should be. One pastor had a midweek service on Wednesday. One pastor had a midweek service on Thursday, and they were a fussing and fighting. The guy that had it on Thursday, he said, well, that's not scriptural. I said, well, you show me in the Bible where you're commanded to have yours on Wednesday. Having a midweek service, I think, is a great idea. I think it's a wonderful thing. But if a guy wants to have it on Tuesday, let him have it on Tuesday. If he has it on Wednesday or Thursday, whatever the case, okay. But that thing right there was not worth turning a city upside down. Watch two fundamental Baptist preachers not get along over an opinion. And most of the time, we fight over our feelings. We fight over our opinions. We fight over a circumstance. Now, God said, blessed are the peacemakers. Now, we're not to have peace or unity at any cost. But our problem is most of the people in this church, and we have a very peaceful church. We have a great attitude. I'm not here tonight trying to fix up something that's damaged. I believe in preventive maintenance. I'm going to teach you something, and we'll walk out of here, and most of us say, oh, we hear that sort of stuff all the time, preacher. We're trying to live that. But let me tell you, most churches, when people get along, they're not fighting over the doctrine of salvation in the average fundamental Baptist church. They're fighting over the fact that somebody didn't like the color of the carpeting that was put down in the auditorium, which is as stupid and as petty as it could be. God doesn't want us fighting over those dumb little things. And the same thing is true. If you had two young people that weren't getting along over here at Martinsburg Christian Academy, I'll promise you they weren't fighting over the doctrine of the Holy Ghost of God. They were fighting over who sat at whose table at lunch. And that's immature. And look, if you ever find two of our fellas, our adult men fussing, I doubt, I've been here 8 years and it has been rare that we've ever had a tuffle between two people over the doctrine of soul winning. But they will get in a fuss over who used the lawnmower last. I'll kill you, you touch my lawnmower. Well, I'll kill you back. Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. Now, I'm not going to give you anything profound tonight. You never get anything profound from me. But I'm going to give you some very practical guidelines and some things about you and I being peacemakers. For instance, I think we ought to be peacemakers in regard to our relationship with the community. The Bible says in 1 Timothy 2:2, for kings and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. Here's talking about those that are in authority and kings, virtually referring to even the government and those that surround you locally. And I say, you and I, we ought to work at being peacemakers in our community. You've noticed here at our church, there have been times when we've invited the veterans of our community to honor them. I would like to honor and treat them right. And I want to be a peacemaker with them. We want to get along. We've honored the policemen in our community and the fire department and those that are paramedics. We brought them in here. Why? Want to treat them right. And listen, folks, it's a real good idea. As long as we don't have to give up our biblical convictions, it's a real good idea for us to treat people like that very well. Very well. I remember it wasn't long ago. Well, it's been about 3 years ago. We had a little situation that had come up, and it was in between, after church on a Sunday morning. We called the police out. I think something had been stolen or something had happened here at the church, and church had concluded on a Sunday morning, and we called the police out, and a couple of police officers came out, and I was standing out in the parking lot, and I said to them, I said, fellas, I'm sorry I had to call you out today. And they said, oh, Pastor Owens, that's fine. That's fine. This is our job. We don't mind coming around here. And one said, well, I was here the day that you gave me, honored us in your church service, and you gave us a free book, your book on character. And he said, hey, you can call us anytime. Now, you know what? That's a pretty good relationship to have with the local police department. We have some special needs adult men. And one day, one of them walked by the fire alarm in our new building and gave her a yank and set off the fire alarm, and the fire department had to come. And they were very, very gracious. It was a good thing that they were. Of course, there's some of those people that we had brought and honored and treated them right and tried to be kind to them. It's a good thing that they were happy with us, because the very next week, the very same guy pulled the fire alarm again. Now, that week, they started to give us a few instructions on how we ought to handle this. We think we've got it cared for. But listen, I think that you and I ought to be peacemakers with those in our community. I don't understand a church that wants to start a fight with the fire department, and a church that would want to start a fight with the police department. And I don't think that's how God intended things. Now, if ever the fire department comes out here to our church and says, now, Jeff Owens, you're going to stop preaching salvation by grace through faith, I'll say, put them up now. Put them up now. You don't tell me what I'm going to preach. But have you noticed they haven't come to tell us that? You take our fire code. The fire marshal comes out to our church every once in a while. We welcome him with open arms. And he'll say, Pastor Owens, you ought to be careful of this or careful of that. I'm good with that. I don't have any problem with that. I'll tell you why. I love my people, and I want them safe. And I love them more than the fire marshal loves them. When he comes and says, if you fix this, the people will be safer, I'll say, I'd like to fix that because I want the people safe. I love these people. The city officials, when I first arrived here in town, I went around and I met every one of the city officials and let them know I was here, and if I could ever serve them, I'd be glad to do it. You notice we have vehicles that when there's vehicle inspection and things needed on any of the church vehicles, I don't fight them over that. I want them to be safe. We want to be good neighbors. We want to get along with the people that live next door. You know, a Christmas or two ago, we bought some boxes of chocolate-covered cherries, and about 250 boxes altogether. Put a nice Christmas card from the church on it, and it said, to our neighbors. And I had our staff go and visit all the houses, this great big mobile home park beside us, and up and down Route 11. They went and knocked on every door, and we gave them the gift of a box of chocolate-covered cherries for Christmas and a little Christmas card, and thanked them for being the neighbors of the Shenandoah Bible Baptist Church. Why? I want to keep peace with those people. I don't want to start a war with them. And let me tell you all something so you understand. Having your house right next door to an independent fundamental Baptist church that has hundreds of bus kids running everywhere, tearing through their gardens, spreading trash, I think we better work at keeping peace with people. I think our next door neighbors, our building codes, we want to do things right. Hey, listen, we have some police officers. They come and they post themselves down here at the end of our lane on church on a Sunday. Why? Well, you've got hundreds of cars leaving this place, and we can bind up the traffic out there on Highway 11 in a moment. At our conferences, oh my, oh my, oh my, it's bumper to bumper people. Listen, do me a favor. When you pull down there toward those officers, you know they've got their police cars parked along the road and got their lights going, and they're trying to keep us safe. When you go down there, they want you to turn your turn signal on. They want you to watch and obey their signal. Please do that for me. I want to keep peace with those people. Keeping peace does not make you a wimp. Keeping peace makes you, it says, you shall be called the children of God. We're supposed to act like that. So let's be peacemakers in our community. Secondly, let's be peacemakers here in our church. The Bible says in Romans 12:18, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Now that, if it be possible, you say, why is that in there? Because of a couple of you, you're very hard to be peaceful with. But it says, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Folks, let me tell you something and remind you something, and you hear me say this every once in a while. We spend a lot of time around each other. Listen, if you go to work, you have to understand, if you go to work, you're with the people you work with on Monday through Friday, and then you go home at night and they go home at night. Now, here's something that you and I face, though. We have to face something. We're together an awful lot. I mean, we're together on Sunday morning and on Sunday night and on Wednesday night, and then we have a couple hundred kids that go to our Christian school, and our kids are here on Monday and on Tuesday and on Wednesday and on Thursday and on Friday, and then they're here. We have our ministries on Saturday. You know, folks, when you're together with a bunch of people that are not your blood relatives, and you're with some of them 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week, and then when we get time off, we have a picnic, we have an activity, we go to Sunday school, and all of it. Hey, you could get on each other's nerves if you're not careful because of the amount of time we spend together. And so we've got to be careful that we on purpose think through this thing of being peacemakers in the church. See, we have our school and our activities and our choirs and our Sunday school classes and our church services and our bus routes and our soul winning and our youth ministry and King's Kids, and we've got our own baseball league. Listen, people out in the world, if they go to work all day with a group of men, their boys don't necessarily play on the same baseball team on the weekend. Not necessarily. We deal with that because we come out of the world to be separate. That means as we come out of the world to be separate from what? Their warring, rude ways. Well, let's not come to church and be rude and be warring among ourselves. You know, the devil would always like to cause division in the church. He doesn't need your help. We've got to learn to be patient with one another. We've got to remember that nobody's perfect. And folks, do this. Do yourself a favor. If you begin to have some disunity with somebody, and let's say it's in your Sunday school class, rather than running and rather than making it worse, why don't you get with them and try to straighten it out? If you struggle with somebody in the church, get with them. Spend some time with them. I'll tell you something to help you. Go soul winning with them. Have about a 15-minute prayer meeting with them sometime, on your face, on your knees. And listen, don't quit your bus route because you can't get along with another worker. Don't quit your ministry. Now, we've got it set up here, as you know. We've got over 20 adult Sunday school classes. Boy, if you go to an adult Sunday school class and you and somebody in there get in a tiff and you can't seem to get along, you don't have to leave our church. You could transfer to another adult Sunday school class. But we didn't do that hoping that everybody'd fuss and fight and hop all over the place. We'd want you to get along. We need to be peacemakers inside the local New Testament church. Listen, the world from the outside will not destroy a church. A church is most apt to be destroyed from the inside. And so we've got to protect the unity and the spirit of our church. So we're to be peacemakers with the people in the community. We're to be peacemakers in our church. Could I recommend that both husband and wife work at being peacemakers in your marriage? The Bible says in Isaiah 32:18, it says, "And my people shall dwell in a peaceable habitation, in sure dwellings, and in quiet resting places." It talks about resting places. Let me explain to you, most people, their resting place is their home. Their dwelling is where they live. Their habitation is where they live. Now, some of you say resting places. Brother Owens, I interpret that as church. I get my best sleep in church. That's not what the Bible's teaching there. But it's talking about, I believe that this verse could say to us, it ought to be peaceful in our homes. Now, one of the reasons why it's not peaceful in our homes is because we not follow God's order of command. God is to be the head of the man. The man is to lead the wife, and the husband and wife are to lead the children. You get that out of sync, you're not going to have peace. You won't have peace. But you know something that I've learned, and you know it, I know it. Did you know at home, if it's a husband and wife, you know it only takes one to end an argument? If just one person will humble down, be quiet, and stop, usually those little petty arguments between a husband and wife would stop. Don't yell back. Sometimes, and again, you know, we talk about, I like that verse in Jude 3, earnestly contend for the faith. I doubt that there's a husband and wife that were fighting over the issue of the purity of the King James Bible this week. That's not what you were fighting about. In other words, it's time for some of us to shut her down a little bit, maybe not yell back, not defend ourselves so much. Somebody here, you owe your mate an apology tonight. You came to church, you haven't spoken to each other, you're mad, you're looking at her out of the corner of your eye right now. You ought to be a peacemaker in marriage. Look, Mrs. Owens and I decided a long time ago when we got married for good, period. Till death do us part. So what that caused us to do is this. We're thinking, okay, we're staying married anyway. And since we're staying married anyway, why should we have hours or days or weeks of coldness and fuss and fight? I'm not going anywhere. She's not going anywhere. Why not fix it quickly? And all it takes is for one of the two of us to step up and say, I'll be the peacemaker here. I want to mend this. And I believe that in our marriages, we need to be peacemakers. Hey, learn to say you're sorry quickly. Quickly. Hey, in the church, folks, let's not take forever to apologize to each other. Don't be so bullheaded. Don't take so long. The quicker we fix it, the better off we are. I'm a pretty quick apologizer. I work at it. Well, I've just got too much work to do to have the tension of a problem between me and somebody. I want to get it over with and get on with it. And we waste too much life. Hey, let me tell you something about your marriage that will help you for someone to be a peacemaker. Avoid the things that cause fights. Do you know most of you know what flips the switches of your mate? You know if you say something about that right there, get ready, you're going to Fifth City. And you ought to learn what creates the tension and try to avoid or learn how to handle those things so you don't cause fusses. Be a peacemaker in your marriage. I had to learn something about Mrs. Owens. When we first got married, I don't know why, I used to pat her on top of the head. Now, for the longest time, she didn't say a word, but one day she did, and I've never done anything about it since. I mean, I don't know why I'd pat her on top of the head. And one day she said to me, I'm not your puppy dog. Okay. You know something? Ever since that day, I've not patted her again. I don't want to get bit. But you know, most of you know those areas that are extra sensitive for your mate, and you've got to learn how to handle them. You say, well, I think they ought to just grow up. Won't you grow up? I agree, but did you know something? Mrs. Owens can't change me, and I can't change her. God left me responsible for Jeff Owens. And some of you, it's always if she would or if he would, how about if you do your part? I know this, I can be right with God by doing my part. And if I stand before God and I've done what I'm supposed to do in regard to my mate, and if she has not done what she's supposed to do, she's in trouble with God. We always want to blame each other, but I say let's be peacemakers in our marriage. Somebody in marriage has to be the healer. Somebody's got to be willing to humble down a little bit and get things fixed. Most marriages could be healed if somebody would become a peacemaker. And let me tell you again, in your marriage, the sooner you make peace, the better. Those that let long-term issues not be resolved, those are the marriages that eventually get destroyed. The quicker you make peace in your marriage, the stronger it'll be, the less apt it is to end up on the rocks or destroyed. So I said this, we should be peacemakers in the community. We should be peacemakers in the church. We should be peacemakers in our marriages. Let me request and suggest to you that we be peacemakers between our children. Between our children. The Bible says in Proverbs 17:17, a friend loveth at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. I don't know everything that verse teaches, but I do know I had a brother, and I do know there was adversity. I am living proof of that right there. Brothers and sisters, they live together. They're growing up together. They're maturing together. They're learning how to and how not to together. And as a result of that, there will be contention as they're learning how to behave. And let me tell you, if you only have one child, you're going to have to work extra in teaching your child how to get along with people. You say, why? Well, people that have brothers and sisters at home, they're constantly learning people skills in relationships. Or bad people skills in relationships, but they are learning about people at home. Listen, Kids, and we know it because they're immature and they're learning, they're going to fuss. You need to teach your children how to share with each other. And what is that? That's being a peacemaker. And every mother here knows a big part of rearing children is mama being a peacemaker. She's trying to help two brothers get along and help two sisters to get along, help a brother and sister to get along, help the children up the street get along with her kids. Hey, what? We're to be peacemakers between our children. Kids are to treat each other right. Now, let me tell you something, though. Sometimes children in a home treat each other the way they see their parents treating people. You know, I watch a mama, she corrects a child. You've got a sister and she's screaming at the top of her lungs at her sister. Where'd she learn to scream like that? Now, a child can learn to scream without an example. But many times, moms and dads will go to correct their children and not realize their children are behaving in some of the very ways mom and dad behave. Mom, you need to stop and realize something. When you say to your child, you shouldn't raise your voice at somebody that you love like that, you really straighten your child out right there. Now, I think there may be times when a parent ought to raise their voice. I think a preacher ought to raise his voice. But I think what I'm telling you is when you're a loose gun and you're emotional and you're always screaming and then you go to correct your children because they're screaming at each other, you need to stop and realize they may be mimicking something. Brothers and sisters, I believe this. I think the brother-sister relationship helps to prepare both for marriage. I think a brother ought to learn how to treat his sister. He's going to need to learn how to treat a wife someday. I think a sister ought to learn how to treat her brother. She's going to have a husband someday. I think you ought to help them to get along because it's a good in-house training for the husband-wife relationship. I think we ought to teach our children to serve one another and be good to one another. You say, why? Well, they're going to become a part of the church and we're brothers and sisters in the church. Brothers and sisters that are taught to serve each other at home are more apt to serve their brothers and sisters in Christ down at the church. Teach them to pray for each other. Teach them, hey, you know, every one of our children need to learn how to compromise and get along with each other at home. When a child always gets their way and always have to have their way, they're going to be trouble at work. They're going to be trouble in the community. They're going to be trouble in the church. They can't be given their way all the time. We've got to teach our kids, and when I say compromise, you know, say, well, that word just makes the hair on the back of my neck stick up. Well, maybe you're a puppy and you have fleas, but let me explain. Compromising is something that you do. I'm not talking about your biblical convictions. I stand firm on my biblical convictions. I'm talking about so many other things. Sometimes you just give up the toy and let your brother have it. Sometimes you let somebody else have the last cookie. It's called compromise. It's something that you do. It's kindness. It's sharing. It's something we're supposed to do. And our children ought to be taught that. Moms and dads are to help their children, and moms and dads are to be peacemakers in the rearing of their children. Not only that. Number 5. I think you could do Martinsburg Christian Academy a favor if everybody involved in Martinsburg Christian Academy would be peacemakers. Dr. Hiles used to say this: if you have an enemy, you don't have to kill them. Just tell them to start a Christian school, and they can die a slow, tedious, agonizing death. Anytime you're dealing with anybody's children, get ready. If you're not careful, there's war on the horizon. Oh, my. You ought to, and some of you deal with somebody else's children in Sunday school for 40 minutes on Sunday morning, and you're plumb tuckered out, and you're thinking about how to with those kids, I can't take it. You ought to be a Christian school teacher all day long, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and deal with it. He said, I was at my wit's end with that kid after 30 minutes. Oh, you didn't see nothing yet. But we ought to work at being peacemakers for our Christian school. Hey, we have the old Paz Baptist College, and you know it's functioning now, and on the horizon are our new dormitories, and we're going to open up our college. You know, I think we ought for our schools to want to be peacemakers and help students and people to get along. Listen, hey, you just take, for instance, in a Christian school. You say, well, I see something there I don't like. Well, you're more than welcome to come and talk to us about it. But let me ask you, when was the last time you told anybody about something you do like? It's always amazing to me how somebody can pinpoint what they just can't stand. Well, when's the last time they gave a testimony about what they love? Teachers, learn to be peacemakers. Teachers, be peacemakers among students. So you all know, anytime you're dealing with immaturity, there's the need of peacemakers. Anytime. Anytime there's immaturity, there has to be peacemakers around. Folks, you might as well understand something. All of our children from birth through the age of 18 or 19 years of age, we're all going to need to be peacemakers. It's going to be 24/7 because they're all growing up and learning how to handle themselves. And you say, well, it doesn't stop there, preacher. You might as well throw in 30 to 40 years of age. Yeah, I know. But I'm saying it is more expected of immaturity while it is developing. Matter of fact, I have more patience with immaturity that needs a peacemaker than the older ones, because that's rebellion and denial, and that's pride. That one's a little testier for me. We shouldn't have to be resolving problems among adult people that have already been reared. They ought to be learning how to get along. It is very quiet on this point. Parents, be peacemakers for the school. Hey, students, let me tell you something. You students, when you know of a couple of students that are not getting along, don't feed the fire. Don't feed the fire. That ought not be. You know, if two boys aren't getting along and you're over there coaching one saying, hit him, hit him, hit him. Now that's not a real smart thing to do. And some of your suckers, you got somebody that's a troublemaker prompting you to get in trouble. Now, they'll slip out the back, Jack, and they won't get in any trouble. They'll set you up, and they'll walk away and stick you with all the responsibility. But be peacemakers. Be peacemakers. Hey, I think ladies, you ought to work at being a peacemaker between your husband and the children. I want to recommend that you don't badmouth dad to the kids. That's not a good thing to do. So many times in marriage, husbands and wives can slam each other in the presence of the children through innuendo. One of the biggest things I had to work on for my wife's sake. When we first got married, if I were a little bit upset with her, I could correct her. No, I would correct the kids in her presence, but there was always a touch of innuendo against her. I didn't do her a favor, and I didn't do my kids a favor either. Mrs. Owens and I, we had to learn that if there was something that needed to be fixed between us, we do it in private, but those kids need to see we love each other and respect each other. Look, kids better learn how to respect authority. But I think moms ought to work at being a peacemaker between dads and their children. And so, and you mamas know what I'm talking about. Dad comes home and he's a little testy. He's a little rough. He's been out there fighting the world all day long, and he gets home and starts barking out orders, and I want this and I want that, and he gets a little gruff. And there are some times that moms will say, Daddy's been busy today. She's being a peacemaker. She's not trying to put him down. She's trying to keep the communication and the relationship between the kids and dad right. That's very important. And again, it's real quiet in here, but I'm telling you the truth right now, and you know I am. Mamas, you help with that. You help with it. Be a peacemaker. Keep the relationship between dad and the kids as spiritual and as respectful as you possibly can. And let me throw something in here about this thing of what we'd call stepchildren. New dad comes into the home. Let's work at building that relationship between the children and the stepdad. And I'll recommend this to anybody in here, either a stepdad or a stepmom. You listen to me and let me tell you something. In most cases, if you come into a new home and you criticize somebody's what we'll call real dad or real mom, you may be destroying yourself in that child's eyes. Because for you to constantly be attacking that real dad or that real mom, I hate to say it, I don't care how bad that real dad or how bad that real mom was, those kids still love their parents. So you be careful. You be careful and be a peacemaker in all those relationships. This business of the exes and everybody just fussing and fighting and throwing jabs at each other constantly. You're going to regret that. That'll come back to bite you someday. And I'm not saying you must condone or agree with the bad behavior of an ex. I'm just saying to you, we ought to be working at creating some peace and show some mature behavior. We're going on. It's very peaceful in here tonight. And so I say, ladies, be peacemakers between your husband and the children. And then men, let's reverse that. You be a peacemaker between the children and your wife. Be careful bad-mouthing your wife to your children. Parents need to learn to get the Bible as their guide, and then they need to learn to back each other. Build one another up in the children's eyes. Don't destroy your child's opinion of the primary authorities in their life, and that's your husband or your wife. So be a peacemaker. Look, dads, if mom and one of the kids not getting along, if you can do it rightly, try to fix that relationship and keep the respect in it, and let the children see that you respect your wife and that you love your wife. That'll make a difference. Let me go on. This one won't be a very long point. Be a peacemaker with your in-laws. Be a peacemaker with your in-laws. You know, it's that age-old thing about how you fussing and fighting with the mother-in-law, and that, hey, we ought to do everything we can to live peaceably among all men. You got to get along with those folks. And again, I'm going to tell you something. Men, you spend a bunch of time criticizing her parents, and you say, well, they're not really good folk. Let me tell you something. She still loves her mom and dad. And if you don't have anything good to say, maybe I'll just shut up. Or let me retract the word shut up. Close your big fat mouth. You're not doing yourself any good. You say, I'm going to send them a nice letter. You say, I will, and I'll put a bomb in it. It would be good for some of you to work on your relationship with your in-laws. And now there are lots and lots of people that have excellent relationships with their in-laws. I got along with my mother-in-law just fine. Mrs. Owens has gotten along with my parents. There's just no tension. And we like that. Now, we've had to work at it. We've had to plan to do it, but it's doable. You ought to get along with them. Do your dead level best and plan it. Hey, you say, well, what do we do? I'd be careful bringing up subjects that you know are going to cause contention. I'd do what I could. I'd pray for them. I'd love them. I'd give them some place in your life. Now, some of you say, well, we can't spend a lot of time with our in-laws because of the way they behave. I understand. But find some place for them in your life. Have a decent relation. Be a peacemaker with the in-laws. And I'm talking about brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws. And again, I'm not telling you, you say, well, they drink and they cuss and they, all that. I understand. Try to figure out ways to have relationships with difficult people. I think you ought to do it. I think you ought to work at being a peacemaker. And I'm not telling you to give up your convictions. I've already told you. We're to earnestly contend for the faith. But most of the time, you're not fighting with your mother-in-law about the doctrine of the Holy Spirit. It's about something else. Silly. The potato salad at the family reunion. How you thought it tasted so bad she was trying to poison you and kill you. No, she just can't make good potato salad. There's not poison in it. But we ought to get along. I think it'd be a good idea for you to know the in-laws' birthdays and anniversaries and be expressive. Some of you men that you can't get along with a mother-in-law or a father-in-law, if you one day made a telephone call on the anniversary and it was you, not their daughter, but you, said, hey, I remember today was your anniversary. I want to wish you a happy anniversary. They'd be shocked. What are you doing? You're trying to be a peacemaker. You're trying to keep the relationship strong. So, in this effort to be a peacemaker, we ought to be peacemakers in the community and peacemakers in the church, peacemakers in our marriages, peacemaker between the children and father, and peacemaker between mother and the children, and between the children, between brothers and sisters, and be peacemakers for the Christian school, and be peacemakers with your in-laws. I think you ought to be a peacemaker in your neighborhood. We hear a lot of teaching, and of course the Bible talks about loving your neighbor as yourself. Ephesians 4, verse 1 through 3 says, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you that you walk worthy of the vocation wherewith you were called, with all lowliness and meekness and with long-suffering, forbearing one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Folks, we need to learn how to get along. Some of us don't get along with our next door neighbor. Now, I realize it says, as much as is in you, as much as possible, live peaceably among all men. There are some people that are almost impossible to get along with, and I understand that. But we ought to work at getting along with our next door neighbor. You say, well, how do I do that? Well, maybe there's someday you ought to make some homemade cookies and take it to your next door neighbor. You may not always need to go over and tote your family Bible and try to get them to sit down and read the Bible for 15 minutes with you. Maybe you ought to just take them some homemade cookies or some homemade bread and make little gestures of kindness and try to get along with them. Oh my, when I lived up in Indiana, I lived right beside a guy by the name of Bob. Bob was almost impossible to get along with. I'd watch Bob. He'd stand out there. We had an above-ground pool, had a big privacy fence around it so our children could swim modestly. And Bob, right next door to us, he'd be out there watering his grass and watering his flowers constantly. One day the kids had been out and they'd been swimming and splashing water, and our pool was right within 2 foot of our property line in a fence. Next thing I know, the kids had come in from swimming and Bob was knocking on my door. He said, "I want to talk to you. Your water's in my backyard." Well, he was just watering his backyard. I'm sure about a bucket of water got in his grass. And he was just irate because some water got in his backyard. I said, "Bob, I'm going to tell the kids to splash on the other side of the pool." He said, "I'd appreciate that." So I told the kids, try to splash on the other side of the pool because Bob don't want our water in his backyard. Bob was so hard to contend with. We had a fenced backyard, and my boys played ball. They played baseball, and they played basketball, and they played football, and they played tennis, and everything that had to do with the ball, they played. Every time you turn around, one of our balls would go into Bob's yard. And the kids, Bob said, "You may not come in my yard." When we left there, Bob brought us bags of balls. He kept them for years. He just stored them up, had them marked Owens's balls. When we were moving away, he said, "You know, y'all have been good neighbors. I thought I'd bring you these balls back." I thought, "You jerk." I'm not telling a story now. I'm telling it. This happened. Brought us garbage bags full of basketballs and footballs, and my kids are saying, "I remember this, got this 8 years ago from grandma. Almost impossible to get along with. But we worked at that thing, and we worked at that thing, and we worked at that thing. And I had to work on my kids. One day I found out they had opened their bedroom window, and Bob had a statue of Mother Mary in his front yard. My kids had gotten so irritated. Bob kept their balls. He was just constantly doing things to irritate 3-year-olds. That's how Bob was. Grown adult man going, at 3-year-olds. I'm thinking, this guy, he's almost impossible to live with. One day I went up in the boys' bedroom, and they had their window open, and they had their BB guns out. And they had shot the nose off of Mother Mary's statue in Bob's front yard. I said, "Boys, what are you doing?" They said, "It's vengeance for our balls. We want our football back." I had to teach the kids unity. You say, "Did you ever tell Bob?" No, I didn't tell Bob. Let Mary tell him. Hey, listen, we've got to learn to be peacemakers. It's hard. And look, Bob was not saved, and I would expect Bob to act in that way. But you and I, we shouldn't act like that. We shouldn't act like that. Be a peacemaker at work. Proverbs 12:20 talks about the importance of peace and how peace produces joy. Let me tell you some things about being a peacemaker at work. I wouldn't go around discussing your pay rate or anybody's pay rate at work. You're going to cause a fight. Hey, if you get a raise or somebody else gets a raise, I just keep that all to yourself. I'll tell you why. People fuss about those things. You'll start a fight. I wouldn't go around discussing with everybody your boss's faults. Some of you are very guilty of that. Look, if they wanted you to be a boss, they would have made you the boss. He has something on you. Most people can't handle that kind of talk. Learn to get along with fellow employees. I'll tell you something. If I work somewhere, I wouldn't want to go and make it bad. I wouldn't want it to have a bad attitude all day long, every day. The reason why some of you don't like your job is because you're not a peacemaker. You're not a peacemaker. Let me finish with this, and I'm done. We all need to be peacemakers for the sake of the lost. In Philippians chapter 4, verse number 7, it says, "And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." Soul winners are peacemakers between God and man. You see, man is lost and he's a sinner and he needs to be born again. And when a soul winner brings the two of them together, you have brought peace into the life of a human being. We are to bring God and man back together. That's what soul winners do. Be a peacemaker for the lost. And so, when we look at these attitudes that ought to be from the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5, God says to us, he says in verse number 9, he said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. I think the reason why in that particular beatitude it says they shall be called the children of God, I believe God's saying when you're a peacemaker, people will notice that that is an attribute of God. You say, well, what price should I pay to make peace? Well, look at the price that God made to make peace between God and man. He sent his son. You say to be a peacemaker might cost me something. It cost God something for you to be at peace in your salvation. It cost him his very son. And every once in a while, being a peacemaker is going to cost you a little something. You have to bite your tongue. You have to be quiet. You have to hesitate. But we, as God's people, should be peacemakers. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes. Every head bowed, every eye closed. If you're here today and you're not saved, God would like for you to have the peace of knowing you're saved. You come tonight. We'll take a Bible and show you how to be born again. There may be husbands and wives that need the altar. Maybe brothers and sisters that are fussing. I don't know of it, but maybe someone in the church, even somebody here, not getting along. Maybe you need to go to work tomorrow and say, you know what, I just don't want to go there and cause fusses and fights. I don't want that. You might need the altar in regard to this thing of being a peacemaker. I'm going to ask the instrumentalists to begin to